thought about the things that just keep us divided as a nation and just wondering about the changes in people and what they're going through, we have our expert here with us today, Mr. Dana Smith. He is an internationally known diversity trainer. Dana, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited about you being here because your work in the world and in our community is so on point with what I want to do with this show here. It's Just Us show. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Charlene. It's good to see you again,
Hi,
and to both of you as well. I mean, I was just too excited to be here, just dealing with these issues of diversity and talking about how they just pertain to all issues. And you were just touching on that issue of the workforce,
Yeah.
preparing our children. We've got names, millennials, the baby boomers, you name it. We got issues of age and culture and background. All of that comes into our workplace, even what you choose as a career. Fortunately, my career finally found me. This is my work and the passion that I have behind the work because I've seen so much change happen in a positive way. But what's missing is what you're offering here, which is a forum of diverse voices so we can address these issues. So I'm really proud to be a part of your process.
Yeah, glad you're here, really. Do you typically work with individuals? Do you work with groups? How do you do your work?
I do both. Formerly, I did almost all of my work inside of corporate America. Now I do it almost exclusively in educational institutions. So I do coaching around being comfortable with difference, diversity, if you will. I also go into institutions like schools and create whole programs to make sure all children are experiencing learning in a way that can be fun, in a way that they could be taught. I sometimes share with educators if the students aren't learning the way you're teaching, maybe we need to start teaching the way in which they learn. And that has changed.
Yes.
That's
That has
awesome. I think
changed.
that is needed because you base children on, you just do this certain way, but not everybody thinks that way. And when they don't pass the test or something, but maybe they didn't learn the way it was taught. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. With such a focus on like standardized testing and standardization
Yes.
in the education system, you know, it makes you, it's great to hear that is a conversation happening about, you know, maybe it's not so much the system, but let's look at the kids, let's look at, you know, their
And the
personalities.
diversity.
Absolutely.
What is one of the problems or situations you see a lot in the schools, or what type of age group do you deal with? Is it all age groups?
With the entire range, well, I should say I start usually about third grade and up through, or all the way through seniors in high school. But some of the challenges I still have is the lack of information that people have about each other when they're different. It's just not still talked about. It's a tough conversation to have. As a matter of fact, when I'm working with the educators, I call those courageous conversations. Because sometimes it can bring stuff up. You could say some things that accidentally will put you in a compromising position in terms of, oh, I'm not one of those kind of thing. But for me, that's because we're not comfortable talking about some of these issues. And it affects our children.
Right.
We got tracking in schools. That's another issue. What if you're in the more advanced class versus the more regular class? Or in a special needs class? Those issues around things like that, it can really get in the way of children being able, one, to want to learn, and two, want to learn from a person vis-a-vis a teacher in front of the room who doesn't feel comfortable with some of their differences. So we got all those kind of challenges, and, you know, the normal stuff like language and culture
Yeah.
too.
I was going to say culture.
Yes.
Is that a big issue?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. On a national level, not just in our schools, but particularly in our schools, I think we need to have, again, more conversations, but also have more intermixing of our students.
Yes.
We have something called Mix It Up Day that I advocate for kids. So sit somewhere different in the cafeteria, sit somewhere, talk to someone different, and do it intentionally. So if
Right.
it doesn't happen, it won't happen unless you really intentionally do it.
It's funny you say that. I was born in England and I was raised multicultural. So I had a Korean best friend and white best friend, and so that's what I was used to. And then when I came to America and I was in probably 6th grade and I went in the cafeteria and I was shell-shocked because I saw the groups and I didn't know where to sit. So I sat by myself and said, everybody come figure me out, because I didn't know where to fit in. You know, but I definitely, it was real hard for me to adjust because the mix was my normal life. And then coming over here and seeing it was a scary experience because where do you go? It wasn't about popularity or who's the popular, who's not. It's who do I belong to? Who do I fit in with? So I just kind of pulled to myself.
So
yeah.
one thing that you mentioned, Dana, is that you teach people to talk, well, teachers may not be the right word, but you explore maybe people talking about those things that maybe we don't want to talk about, that we're afraid to talk about. Can you give us a little quick review of that, or is there something you can do with us real quick just to give us an
That'd be
example?
exciting.
Absolutely. One of the activities I do that I get a lot of fun out of is I put a piece of paper, just a blank piece of paper for everyone, and ask them to draw a picture of a quote-unquote Indian, right? No conversation, just draw it. You got 3 minutes. Draw it like a third grader. Now, these is for adults as well as the students in the room. And everybody typically has an image of someone with native dress and a feather. And I say, when was the last time you walked down the street and saw someone native dress with a feather in 2013?
Right.
So it speaks to how stuck we are in the imagery
Yes.
around certain
That
groups
is
of
the truth.
people.
Yeah.
And see, and then they kind of open up, and yeah, we all got some of this stuff. So some of my classes are actually entitled Unlearning. How do I unlearn some of the bias? Because I wasn't born in the world thinking this way,
That's good.
that you can't because this or the other. And of course, gender is a major issue as well.
That is interesting. Now, I'm curious, do you find that a lot of that, of people wanting to stay away from topics, comes from their own personal fear of not wanting to push buttons? I mean, do you find a lot of like people having their own fears, not so much of being judged, but of feeling like they might make someone else feel judged?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you address that in making people feel like they can have those conversations?
One thing that I try to do to address that fear, and I like your choice of words, because it is sometimes absolutely fearful to be thought of in terms of being against something or somebody when that might not actually be me. One of the ways I do that is encourage people to understand that we are truly in this thing together.
Dana,
Everybody has biases.
I know, I'm sorry, it's so much, you're so rich. We don't have enough time. But you'll come back to join us, though?
I'd love to.
Great, great, great. You have to include you, Dana, in one of the things that we just love to do,
Okay.
cupcake in a jar.
Oh.
We want to share our cupcake in a jar with you.
much.
Thank you so much. We'll be right back.